For years, perhaps your entire life, you've been standing in a waiting room that doesn't exist, pacing floors that are already moving beneath your feet. You've been holding your breath for a signal, a sign, a specific moment when the chaos would settle and the scattered fragments of your existence would finally click into place with an audible, satisfying snap. That moment is not coming. It is already here. And if these words are reaching you now, in this specific sliver of your timeline, it's not a glitch in an algorithm or a random collision of data. It is a recognition, a mirror held up to a version of you that is finally, completely, and irrevocably prepared for what assembles on your horizon. The internal warfare ceases today, not next week, not when you've finally untangled the specific knots of finance or family that have been keeping you awake. Right now, because the brutal, invisible labor has already been completed. Every extreme pressure, every moment that shattered your expectations and left you picking up pieces of a heart you didn't think could break further. Every instance of feeling utterly invisible in a crowded room or fundamentally misunderstood by those who claim to know you. None of it was random. It was a forging, a calculated, relentless, and necessary conditioning. And that conditioning, soaked in silent tears and sleepless vigilance, has delivered you to this exact coordinate, where the atmosphere itself is about to change. You can feel it in your body right now, can't you? That familiar, strange weight? Maybe you're sitting in a parked car, engine dead, hands still on the wheel, unwilling to walk into the house. Maybe you're paused mid-task at work, staring at nothing, wondering why your pulse has subtly quickened, why you can't shake this dense, undeniable intuition that something vast is approaching your life, something that will fundamentally alter the trajectory of your personal history forever. What almost nobody understands about genuine rupture and reinvention is that they never arrive with trumpets or official announcements. There is no banner drop, no notification on your lock screen informing you that today is the day your reality permanently shifts. Instead, what you experience is a silent certainty, an internal whisper that begins faintly but, over days, becomes so deafening that ignoring it is no longer an option. And once you truly tune in, you realize that voice has been speaking for months, asking you to get ready. You have been walking through fire. I know this to be true. You've been tested in daily situations that would dismantle most people walking the streets, convinced they are piloting their own lives. I'm talking about the kind of trials that don't just strain your bank account or your schedule, but that directly assault your identity. The crises that force you to question who you really are, what you're truly made of, and whether you even deserve the beautiful things you dream of in those solitary, silent hours before exhaustion finally claims you and you manage to sleep. And through all that chaos, you survived each test, but not merely as someone who narrowly escapes a shipwreck, gasping on the shore. You were fundamentally transformed by them. Arriving here already separates you from the masses. Most cannot endure this discomfort without sprinting back to the familiar, even if the familiar is a cage. That's why I want you to leave your mark. Make visible a decision most are too afraid to make. In the comments, write, "I claim my becoming." Not just as words on a screen, but as evidence that you are willing to endure the difficult passage so your authentic life can finally begin. Now, let's continue. Pause for a moment and honestly consider where you were exactly 1 year ago. Recall the problems that consumed your mind, the people who stole your peace, the irrational fears that kept you frozen in the face of simple decisions. Now look at where you stand today. You might occupy the same physical space. You might live in the same house, sit in the same chair, interact with the same people at work or in your family. But internally, you have been dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up. Your emotional foundation is infinitely more solid than it was. Your clarity on what you want and what you refuse is crystalline. And your tolerance for any situation, relationship, or dynamic that does not serve your mental well-being and your peace has simply evaporated. That's why certain things suddenly hold zero interest for you. That's why friendships or family bonds you once considered essential to your survival now feel like weights draining your vital energy. That's why those superficial goals you once chased with desperate urgency, trying to fit into society's mold, now seem hollow and meaningless. What's happening isn't bitterness, apathy, or depression. What's happening is you've become selective. Your energy has passed through such a fine filter that it now literally rejects low-grade experiences. It's as if you've been watching your entire life on a blurry, old television, and suddenly someone upgrades you to the highest possible definition. Once you see reality, people, and yourself with such clarity, it is biologically impossible to close your eyes again and pretend you don't notice. What nobody tells you is that many of those failures you suffered, those doors you wept over when they slammed in your face, they weren't doors denying you an opportunity. They were emergency exits being permanently sealed with brick, because life knew you could not go back that way. You will not return to who you used to be, nor settle for the crumbs you once accepted out of fear of being alone. Those backward exits had to be forcibly blocked so you would stop trying to flee to your old comfort zone every time the journey toward your future got difficult. And it has been undeniably difficult. There were entire nights when you questioned every decision you'd made. Mornings when you opened your eyes and wondered where you would find the physical and mental strength to face another day, faking a smile at work or at home. Moments of such profound exhaustion that throwing in the towel and giving up seemed like the only logical, reasonable option, simply because holding on to hope hurt too much in your chest. But you did not give up, even when you had every perfect excuse to do so, even when every circumstance around you screamed that enough was enough. Something very deep inside you refused to surrender, and that wasn't mere human stubbornness. It was your essence, that instinctive wisdom, knowing something your frightened, rational mind couldn't yet grasp. You were being forged under extreme pressure into an unbreakable human being. This entire process of silent destruction and reconstruction was measuring your capacity to hold what is coming. And in a moment, I'll tell you why understanding this simple fact is the only thing that will prevent you from sabotaging the greatest blessing of your life just as it crosses your threshold. Because here lies the most dangerous trap of the human mind, the one almost everyone falls into right at the finish line. When you've lived in scarcity for so long, when you've been thirsty, emotionally, financially, spiritually, for years, your first animal instinct upon finding a glass of water is to grab it with both hands, squeeze desperately, and gulp it down in terror that someone might snatch it away. That is the response of trauma, not clarity. You've done all the internal work. You've cleared your mind of the garbage you were carrying. You've aligned with a different reality. And then, in the instant something good finally touches your door, you suffocate it. You squeeze it so hard trying to control it that you destroy the very peace you worked so painfully to achieve. You cannot enter your new life using the survival mechanisms of your past. The defense strategies that kept you alive while crossing the desert are exactly the same ones that will drown you now that you stand before the ocean. Thinking from lack made sense when your environment denied you everything. When you had to fight for scraps of recognition at work, when you hid your true plans for fear of envy, or when you begged for attention in a relationship that left you staring at the ceiling in the early morning hours. But you are now crossing into a scenario of genuine abundance. And if you drag that old desperate energy with you, you will automatically repel what you've been attracting. This is where the art of discernment becomes your most lethal, silent weapon. You must understand something fundamental. Not every opportunity that shines is for you, no matter how attractive it looks on the surface. Not every person who suddenly shows interest in your life deserves access to this new version of you. Your mental operating system has been upgraded, and that means your filters for letting others in must also become unforgiving. It's highly likely you used to say yes to boring invitations, unfair favors, or mediocre connections simply from terror of loneliness or the urgency to feel valued in a group. You tolerated shallow conversations at gatherings with people who called themselves friends, but whom you knew deep down added absolutely nothing to your life. You endured those toxic dynamics only because you believed that was your lot in life and that nothing better existed out there. Those days are over forever. You now have the privilege and the absolute obligation to be strategically selfish with your time and attention. And this will inevitably create friction around you. The people who knew you before this deep transformation won't understand what's happening to you. They'll observe you from a distance, scrutinizing your movements. They'll watch you refuse offers they would kill for. They'll criticize you when they see you silently withdraw, without explanation, from situations, dramas, or people that, in their eyes, seem perfectly normal. They will question your decisions behind your back, murmuring that you've become arrogant, that you're too demanding, that you're wasting good options in life by thinking you're superior. Let them talk. Let their doubts crash against your indifference. What they don't understand is that their confusion is actually the absolute confirmation that you are already operating on a frequency they cannot even perceive. From the perspective of someone living in constant fear and survival mode, security looks a lot like settling for the known, even if it hurts and withers the soul. But for someone who has finally tasted mental freedom, that same mediocre security looks exactly like a cage. You will need an entirely new internal language for this stage of your life, because the old words no longer suffice to describe the calm settling into your body. Talking about synchronicities, about magnetism, about things simply fitting together may sound like madness or abstract concepts to those who have never had to rebuild themselves from ashes. But you will know exactly what these experiences mean, not because someone told you about them, but because you will be breathing them every day from the moment you wake until you sleep. And the evidence that you are no longer the same won't arrive with lightning bolts from the sky or movie-like events. It will come in the most intimate, silent, everyday details of your routine. You'll realize it on an ordinary Tuesday while washing dishes, while showering, while driving to the supermarket. You'll notice your jaw is no longer clenched, that you've gone hours, maybe entire days, without that invisible pressure at the base of your neck that accompanied you everywhere like a shadow. You'll catch yourself reacting with absolute calm, observing instead of absorbing, in the face of provocations or problems that just months ago would have triggered an anxiety attack or a screaming match. You no longer enter the games of others. And then, almost without noticing, the biggest changes will begin to materialize in the physical world. That unexpected message from someone who has exactly the piece you were missing. That solution to a problem that seemed like a dead end, presenting itself in the most absurd, natural, and perfect way possible. Love, opportunities, or clarity arriving just in time, as if an invisible clock had been calculating the exact millisecond to deliver them to you. And every time something like this happens, every time reality undeniably demonstrates that everything is aligning in your favor in ways that defy all human logic, you will find yourself at a brutal psychological crossroads. You will have to make a crucial decision that determines whether you keep that blessing or let it slip through your fingers like sand. You can choose the cowardly path of the cynics and dismiss all of this as meaningless coincidences. Or you can look it directly in the eye and accept the raw truth of what this new level of life demands of you. An emotional price so high that very few have the courage to pay it. That emotional price I'm talking about is nothing other than accepting the immense and sometimes solitary responsibility of knowing you chose the accelerated path toward your own evolution. The vast majority of people out there need entire decades to integrate the level of psychological transformation you were forced to process in just a few months of pure mental agony. They take the scenic, gradual route, slowly adjusting their beliefs, negotiating with their fears, modifying their behaviors drop by drop over the years, until eventually, without much effort, they arrive at a new normal that doesn't discomfort them too much. But you didn't have that luxury. Life put you in the fast lane. That merciless route that breaks you completely, that dismantles your illusions in one blow, so you have no choice but to rebuild from zero, without an instruction manual, picking up the pieces from the floor with your own hands. It is an infinitely faster process, yes, but under no circumstances is it easier. And anyone who says otherwise has never had to look in the mirror without knowing who they were looking at. And now that you are on the other side of that storm, now that the dust has finally settled, you carry within you something that most human beings will never develop in their entire existence. An unshakable certainty that you are absolutely capable of surviving anything the world throws at you. You have arrived at that philosophical and visceral conclusion that you could lose everything external. They could strip away your possessions, your support systems, the people you thought indispensable. And still, you would have exactly everything you need inside yourself to begin again. Your self-worth is no longer tied to the fluctuating circumstances of the economy, to the passing opinions of those observing you, or to the temporary setbacks that once felt like the end of the world. This deep knowledge, this brutal confidence in your own capacity for recovery, this is your new operating base. It is the silent engine that allows you to move through this new landscape of your life without that paralyzing fear that once dictated every decision. Think about it carefully. You no longer have an irrational terror of loss because you have already lost so much along the way and discovered, with amazement, that you remain whole. You did not disintegrate in the process. You no longer fear the judgment of others or destructive criticism because you have already been profoundly misunderstood by those you most wanted to please, and you realize their words have no power to diminish your greatness unless you hand them the keys to your mind. Nor are you terrified of the idea of having to start over in an unfamiliar place or an adverse situation, because you have done it before and found reserves of strength, intelligence, and resilience you never suspected lived within you. Therefore, when the blessings begin to manifest around you, and I assure you with complete conviction that they are already on their way, your only task is to receive them with completely open hands and a clear chest. You must allow all that abundance, whether in the form of resources, opportunities, affection, or simply unshakable mental peace, to flow through you naturally. Instead of clinging to it with that old desperation that once characterized you, you must trust fully that there is always more available for you. Because now you understand that you are connected to an inexhaustible source of possibilities that does not answer to the logic of fear. Share it freely when you feel the genuine impulse to do so, because now you perfectly understand that invisible law which dictates that authentic generosity creates constant circulation. And it is precisely that circulation that generates even more expansion in your own life. What you hold loosely, the universe refills. This is the final, definitive lesson of the process. The masterpiece that completes your transition from that frightened individual who only sought to survive day to day toward this new sovereign entity designed to thrive without apology. It is no longer solely about passively sitting around waiting for a stroke of luck or an isolated miracle to save you from your problems. It is about the fact that you have permanently become the kind of person who inhabits a continuous state of openness and growth. A mental state where extraordinary results are no longer rare exceptions that happen once every 10 years, but completely natural expressions of who you are today. That is exactly what made the entire immense wait worthwhile. That is what every failure, every rejection, every endless night of frustration you had to endure in silence was preparing you for. You were refined by the fire of adversity until you became pure gold, without emotional impurities holding you back. Every tear shed, every trial that seemed unfair at the time, was actually strictly necessary to file down your weaknesses. Every loss you suffered was not a cruel punishment from fate, but an act of surgical cleansing that cleared the physical and mental space for everything that truly belongs to you by right to enter. And now, standing firmly on the other side of all that destruction and subsequent reconstruction, you are finally qualified to hold the full weight of what's coming without being crushed, without your ego betraying you, and without your past wounds sabotaging your reward. Are you ready to receive all the success and calm in the world without the compulsive need to hoard it for fear it will end? And to give the best of yourself without feeling like you're emptying out? The signs are already undeniable, appearing everywhere around you. You feel them vibrating in your physical body long before your rational mind can even name them or find a logical explanation. It's that subtle, constant electricity running up your spine when you make a correct decision. That inexplicable, resounding certainty settled in the center of your stomach, whispering that the winds are finally turning in your favor, irreversibly. Do not make the mistake of ignoring or silencing that instinct. Do not confuse it with naive hope or childish wishes that things will magically improve. What you feel is pure biological and spiritual recognition. It is your deepest essence, clearly identifying the exact frequency of those answers you so desperately requested in the past, feeling them just before they materialize before your eyes in the physical world. This is your moment, and you must believe it once and for all. And it's not your moment because some external power finally took pity on you, or randomly decided you had suffered enough and were worthy of a consolation prize. It's your moment for the simple and compelling reason that you yourself, through pure effort, pain, and deep reflection, became the exact version of your own being that finally has the real capacity to hold everything you've been screaming for. Think about this with rawness and honesty. The version of you walking this world 2 years ago would have completely destroyed these blessings in a matter of days, dragged down by old toxic patterns, insecurities, and the need to self-sabotage. The version of you from just 6 months ago would still have looked at the sky, quietly questioning whether you really deserve to receive such good things, feeling that old imposter syndrome breathing down your neck. But you, the you breathing in this precise instant, the one who has remained steadfast, listening to this until the end. You are impeccably ready. So receive everything coming toward you with the greatest and deepest gratitude you can muster, but never receive it with surprise or disbelief. It is not a stroke of luck. You have earned every inch of this new ground through sheer determination, overcoming every second in which you chose to move forward. Swallowing hard when stopping and abandoning everything seemed like the easiest, most comfortable, most seductive option. Your great moment is not approaching in the distance. It is already breathing in your room. And everything, absolutely everything that has survived until today, has meticulously prepared you not only to receive this monumental change with open arms, but to sustain it over time, multiply it around you, and become forever the living, irrefutable proof that human transformation is completely real and that victory, the kind that forever changes a person's story, is simply inevitable for those who make the irrevocable decision to never, ever surrender.